Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is out, and a ton of people have been having a great time with the game. However, I've also heard from a lot of people saying, hey, I've never tried this series before. It looks cool, it looks interesting. So many people are saying it's great, but I'm not really sure if this is the right game for me. I'm still trying to make a decision. In this video, I'm going to try to give you all some perspective. It's not really a guide for how to play the game. It's more so some information to help you understand some of what you've seen and help you make a decision about whether or not this is the game for you. I started playing in late December. I had always felt like this game was absolutely not for me, not something I'd be interested in, but it turns out I've enjoyed it quite a bit. But at the same time, I absolutely see why there are some people who feel very strongly it's not the game for them. And hopefully for those of you who are on the fence, this video will help you make a decision about whether or not you want to dive in. Please note that while I do plan to do a lot of content for this game, here at Slandered Gaming, we actually focus on CRPGs. So if that interests you, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Now, before we get into some of my tips and perspectives to try to help you understand the game, I want to bring up two issues that would cause players to just strike this game out right off the bat. And I want to confirm for you that yes, if these are an issue for you, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or 1 is probably not a good experience for you. And the first is, I know there's a lot of players who really prefer a fantasy setting. You want to have spells and different races and all sorts of mysticism in your playthrough, and the fact that you don't see any of that in Kingdom Come Deliverance is a turnoff. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, if you believe that's something you really need in order to have a good time, this is probably not the right experience for you. Because not only is Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 and 2 not fantasy games, but to be frank, I would consider them to be almost mundane games. These are the type of games that really lean into some of the mundane aspects of medieval life, and I can see that being a massive turnoff for those people who enjoy a more fantasy setting with a lot of flash and pizzazz. So most likely there's not something magic here, no pun intended, that's gonna all of a sudden make you like the setting more. If you really need your games to be fantasy, you can safely go ahead and move on from this. The other issue that might prevent a lot of players from wanting to get into this type of game is that you don't like dialogue. There are players who will get into games that have dialogue, but they always skip it and go straight to the combat or some other general parts of gameplay. In my opinion, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is definitely not the type of experience that players who don't like dialogue will be able to really enjoy. Probably 60 to 70% of my experience with Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 was sitting and listening to dialogue. And there's very little reason for me to assume that the second game would be any different. Now, I love this. I love stories. I love great voice acting. I love great writing. And all of that is contained within this series. So, in my opinion, the dialogue is absolutely fantastic and a joy to listen to. But I know for many of you, even if the voice acting is great, even if the dialogue is great, you still have no interest and you want to just skip through it and just be able to play. Once again, if that's the type of player you are, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is probably not the type of experience you would enjoy. All right, with those two things out of the way, let me go ahead and address some of the other issues in the game that might be holding some players back from getting into this experience that actually shouldn't stop you from enjoying this game. First and foremost, some of you might be concerned that you won't be able to understand what's going on because, of course, there was already a game that came out. It was 6 years ago. You have no interest in playing that, and so you're wondering if you could just dive into this new experience, and the answer is yes. In my opinion, this game does an incredible job of walking new players through what happened before, giving you all the details that you actually need in a way that's actually still fun for people who are very familiar with the first game. When I did this during my live stream, I had a bunch of people in the chat who knew nothing about the first game, and I asked them after watching these scenes, do you understand? Do you feel like you're caught up? And they actually wrote out in the chat how they interpreted those scenes and what their understanding was of the previous games, and it was all on point. So I know for a fact these scenes do a great job at conveying the information that you need. There shouldn't be any issues with you jumping right in and getting up to speed. The next aspect of the game that I see a lot of people having an issue with is that it's slow, and that's absolutely true. Kingdom Come Deliverance is not a rush, fight all the time type of experience. You are walking around, it's regular life. You do some regular mundane things sometimes, then you talk to some people sometimes, then you craft some things sometimes. And what I would say to you is that sometimes I think watching Kingdom Come Deliverance isn't quite as good as playing it yourself. When you're in complete control of your actions and you can decide, okay, right now I want to do some alchemy. Okay, now I want to do some blacksmithing. Okay, now I want to go explore the world. Okay, now I want to do some fighting. I want to go find some bandits. When you have full control over what the character does, I think it's a little bit more interesting and entertaining than if you are forced to watch somebody else make all those decisions, especially if they are contrary to what you would do. So I would say don't let the slow nature of the game really stop you from giving it a try, because you have so much control over what your character decides to do that even though it's slow, you have so much power, it may or may not really bring down your ability to enjoy the game. Now, next, I want to get into progression, because I know a lot of people have seen all the stats and the systems that are in this game, and it can absolutely look overwhelming. You can look at it and say, I have no idea what I would start on, what I would do, how I move forward with the game. And this is actually a lot simpler than it looks at first glance, or at the very least, you have the ability to make it much simpler if that's what you want to do. Or you can make it very, very complicated and very granular if that's the type of play style that you want as well. It's really up to you what type of game you want, but I'm going to kind of break it down the way that I look at it. And again, I'm the type of player who I like it simple. I want to keep things simple and move forward in a very simple manner. This is not the type of game that I would usually play. Again, I prefer CRPGs, but Kingdom Come's narrative grabs me, and so I decided to get into this anyway. And I think the way that I play it would probably be a lot easier for other people who are not used to this type of game as well. So first and foremost, the stats start with main level. You can completely ignore this, okay? Main level increases by itself. There's nothing you have to manually do in order to increase it. When your stats go up, when your level goes up, or rather when you progress through the story, your main level will automatically increase and you'll get the opportunity to choose different perks, all right? Then you get into the stats. You have strength, agility, vitality, and speech. Strength and agility is really about combat. What type of warrior do you want to be? If you want to be a heavy armor type of guy with a heavy weapon and able to carry heavy loads, then obviously pick strength. If you prefer a more rogue type of playthrough where you're wearing light armors and using lighter agility-based weapons, and in combat you're dodging enemies as opposed to just standing and absorbing the impact, then obviously you're going to want to pick agility. There, in the first game, strength was clearly the better option. In the second game, they're much more even. So you can just decide which one you prefer. It is important that you kind of just make a decision and lean into one, because what types of weapons you use will significantly increase strength or agility more. So if you prefer strength, you want to make sure you're using strength-based weapons. If you prefer agility, you want to make sure you're doing the exact opposite. But once again, neither one is better than the other, so you could just make a decision about what type of play style appeals the most to you. Vitality is all about how much stamina do you have, how long can you go without taking a rest, things of that nature. This will automatically take care of itself. As you go through combat, run around, do things, vitality will increase. You don't have to manually really think about it or try to figure out how to raise this up more. Now, speech is something that not only will it automatically take care of itself, because it's going to increase every single time you talk to somebody and every single time you attempt to barter with a merchant, right? And again, you're going to be talking with people constantly. So this is not something you have to do manually. But even on top of that, speech is really only one part of how you convince people to do things that they don't necessarily want to do. So there are actually 6 different ways that you can persuade characters to do certain things, and all of them use different stats. So speech is going to have a massive impact on whether or not you can persuade a character in dialogue, right? It's going to use mostly speech and then a little bit of your charisma. Now, charisma is derived from the clothes that you're wearing and how clean you are. And I think it's also a little bit about your reputation as well. So in KCD2, unlike KCD1, you can actually switch which type of outfit you're using. There are 3 different outfit types. So you can have an outfit that's for combat, you can have an outfit for stealth, and then you can have an outfit that's specifically for charisma, right? For talking with different people. So you see I have a 17 in charisma when I use this outfit, whereas if I switch to armor, I only have a 7 in charisma. Again, this is all done at the touch of a button, so it's not like you have to manually switch everything out in order to be able to use this system. But if I want to be able to persuade someone, speech is going to come heavily into account, and it's going to use charisma a little bit. Same with coercion. It's going to primarily use speech, and then there's going to be a little bit of charisma. But when it comes to impression and domination, those are going to mainly use charisma. And then they're only going to use a little bit of speech, meaning you could have potentially completely ignored speech, and yet you are still going to have at least 2 very, very good ways to be able to convince people. And all 6 of these dialogue options are going to come into play depending on the type of conversation you are in. So there are some dialogue options where you'll have an impression option, but you won't have persuasion or coercion. Or you might have coercion, but you won't have any of the others, right? So all of these are important. So it's not a situation where, oh, I have low speech and that means I can't persuade anybody to do anything. There are a bunch of different ways for you to create yourself as a character who is able to persuade people if that's what you want to do. The last 2 of them have nothing to do with speech or charisma. Instead, it's about your strength, agility, and vitality. So again, you could decide to have no charisma outfit and completely ignore speech, but you would still be able to use presence and intimidation to basically use your heavy armor and your great weapons and your imposing figure to force people to do whatever it is that you wanted them to do. Don't look at it as, oh, I have to really highly invest in speech if I want to be a charismatic person. That's not the way the game works. So you can make your decision about whether or not speech even matters to you. All right, next up is a list of different skills you can use in the game. Before we even get into them individually, let me make it clear, you want to experiment and figure out what works for you, right? You might decide you really like alchemy and you really like hunting, but you're not a stealthy type of guy and you're not interested in reading anything, and that's fine, right? There's nothing in this list that you really absolutely have to do. It's all about what type of person you are, what type of character are you, and what type of stats do you prefer building up for your playthrough. So don't feel like, oh, for everything, I absolutely have to figure out how to do it on a regular basis. That's not really the case. Everything has an alternative. So first up, we'll go into alchemy. Now, alchemy is about making potions, right? It is highly versatile. It's going to allow you to do a bunch of things that'll help you with combat and with healing. It's actually your main source of healing outside of resting. right? And it'll significantly boost your stats. So it's really, really useful for you to build up alchemy. However, using alchemy completely takes you out of the game. You're basically standing at an alchemy bench and mixing potions together. So some players might prefer to instead use money as an alternative. If you put a greater focus on earning money in ways outside of alchemy, then you could just buy the potions that you need and you don't have to manually figure out this system. On the flip side, creating potions yourself and selling them is an absolutely fantastic way to earn money, especially early in the game. So it's your decision about whether or not you want to do this, but completely ignoring alchemy is absolutely viable. In the first game, you could only use potions when you are outside of combat, but in KCD2, you can get pouches that'll allow you to use 1 or up to 3 potions while you are in combat, although it does take some time to completely drink them, and that makes alchemy even more versatile to have. Next up is Craftsmanship. So this is all about blacksmithing, repairing your weapons and equipment, washing your armor and clothes, or sharpening your weapons. Repairing your armor and weapons is absolutely essential, because if you don't repair them yourself, you have to pay somebody to repair them, and that is an exorbitant expense that, unlike ignoring alchemy, I don't think there's a good way for you to get around this. So you're going to have to go ahead and consistently invest in your kits and use them. Fortunately, kits are usually plentiful on foes, so as long as you keep killing bandits, you'll have a steady supply of them. Washing yourself is also essential. However, going to the extra extreme of actually using soap and going to the lakes, I don't believe is necessary. Usually there are bins in town that you could just do a quick wash up with, and thus far I've found that to be more than sufficient. I think it's very, very important for you to go ahead and invest in this skill, because it's the only way to be able to create the 4th level highest quality gear in the game. You cannot loot that level of quality. You have to create it yourself. And so you'll definitely want to repair your stuff consistently and then make your own weapons so that you'll be raising this on a regular basis. Next up is drinking, which honestly is fun, but it's not necessary at all. You will kind of increase this regularly if you use the save system that the game comes with, because it uses a weird system where you basically have to take a drink in order to be able to save the game. So that'll give you a small amount of drinking, but obviously it'll be a very, very slow way to increase this stat. If drinking is important to you, then you're absolutely gonna wanna either create or buy liquor that you can drink on a regular basis. Personally, I ignored drinking for the most part in the first game, and I think most likely it's going to be the same way here. I thought I was going to be the type of person who was drinking all the time, but being drunk actually prevents you from being able to sprint, which from my perspective, the way I play, brings the game to a grinding halt, so I don't enjoy it at all. So I avoid liquor for the most part, but your mileage may vary. There's definitely, as you could probably see from the perks, some advantages to investing in this skill. Horsemanship basically takes care of itself. It's not something you have to worry about because you constantly need to use your horse to get around anyway. Trying to just travel around on foot is very, very cumbersome. Keep in mind that this skill does not increase when you fast travel. And personally, I didn't care. I still use fast travel all the time and just use my horse when it made sense to me. And thus far, I'm at level 9 in this skill, and I'm still very early in the game, so it seems to be increasing just fine. So I would recommend that you just do what's comfortable for you. This isn't a skill that you need to spend a crazy amount of time focusing in. It'll increase on its own unless you really, really want to invest in mounted combat. If that's the case, there are a couple of nice perks here that'll help you with that maybe you'll want to make a beeline for, but otherwise you could just completely ignore this and it'll take care of itself. Houndmaster is probably the only skill on this entire list that absolutely does not take care of itself that I would still recommend you heavily invest in. So you have to manually praise your dog, give your dog food, and give it commands to do certain things in order to level this skill up. It's all manual, and yet at the same time, it's very, very worthwhile. The dog over time can be someone who's absolutely vicious in combat, causing enemies to bleed, which is extremely useful against armored opponents who aren't going to take a whole lot of damage. So being able to bleed them slowly over time is going to make your fights much, much easier. The dog is obviously also going to distract enemies from you, which is extremely useful in combat. They'll find special items, and they can help in hunting as well. All around, the dog is fantastic. I would highly recommend going ahead and investing into mud. Scholarship is another skill that is not automatic. You have to manually read books and other items in order to increase this skill. It will increase slightly as you learn about new knowledge and things in the world, but that's a slow way of building this up. You're really going to want to manually read if scholarship is important to you. I personally recommend, again, that you go ahead and make the effort to invest in scholarship because it significantly increases the speed at which you learn other skills. And obviously that's very handy, but it's a manual process. You have to sit down and read these books. And for a lot of you, maybe that's too much. Maybe you don't want to be bothered with having to do that, and you would prefer to just be able to play the game and level the skill up that way. That's absolutely fine. Keep in mind, though, that another way in which scholarship is very useful is that it makes it easier for you to persuade guards. So if you want to play as someone who's constantly on a crime spree, scholarship is going to be a great way to reduce the fines you get when going to prison and also make it easier for you to convince guards that you've done nothing wrong. Next on the list is stealth. Stealth is yet another skill that is not automatic. You need to manually go into stealth and do sneaky things in order to build this up. It's extremely useful to do this because my understanding is there are some quests in KCD2, and it was absolutely this way in KCD1, that require you to do things that are stealthy. And so if you already have high levels in the skill, it's going to make those sections significantly easier. Keep in mind again that you have a choice of different outfits you can take, and so you can always go ahead and get yourself a dark suit that'll make it much easier for you to complete these sneaky sections, and then that's going to significantly increase how effective your sneak skills are as well. Survival is a skill that is technically not automatic, but it deals with so many things that you really need that it basically is automatic. If you are dealing a lot with alchemy, you're going to be picking herbs, and that's going to increase survival. You have to be able to eat, and eating is much more difficult in this game than it was in the first one. In the first one, you could basically walk into any inn and there'd be a boiling pot, and you could just eat some out of the pot, and that would take care of your nourishment. Now that is considered stealing, as it rightfully should be, so there's a much bigger emphasis on you actually hunting to get the meat that you need to eat. And then if you want it to actually be edible, you have to cook it, and you're probably going to want to dry it as well so that it lasts longer. So all of the things that are involved with survival, you're pretty much going to be doing anyway. You can use money to make up for all of this. You can use money to just buy the herbs that you need, to just buy the food that you need. And it's not crazy expensive. But again, money is going to be tight, especially at the beginning of the game. So it kind of just makes more sense to focus on survival, but you could do whatever works best for your particular playthrough. And then last on the list is Thievery. Now, Thievery is yet another skill that is not going to automatically increase. You need to manually pick locks or pick pockets. There are a ton of locked doors and locked chests in the game, so you'll be provided with a lot of opportunities to increase this. But keep in mind that picking locks is much more difficult in KCD2 compared to KCD1. I find that if I even attempt to pick a lock that says medium difficulty, the game immediately lets me know there is no chance whatsoever that I'm going to do this successfully. So you're really going to want to invest in this skill if you want to be able to pick the higher level locks. In my opinion, picking pockets is extremely cumbersome. The system has 6 or 7 different levels. The instructions are just crazy. So I hate using it. And so I really like that they've now made it Thievery, where picking locks and picking pockets is all going off the same stat, because now you could just pick a bunch of locks and that'll automatically make you better at picking pockets. And I think that's just a superior way for the game to be set up. So if this is important to you, make sure every time you're running past a lock that you're capable of picking, you go ahead and look around, make sure nobody else is around, and you go ahead and take care of it. All right, so that's a breakdown of all the skills that you see here. So just to briefly recap, Alchemy is nice to have, very versatile, but you can use money to overcome it, so you don't necessarily need it. Craftsmanship, I highly recommend you repair all of your gear, and that'll increase this stat steadily. All the rest of it, blacksmithing, washing your clothes, you can do it if you want to. Sharpening your weapons is an option as well, but it's not necessary. Repairing your armor and weapons is the only part of this that I feel like you absolutely positively need to do. Drinking is completely up to you. If you want to ignore it, you can. If you want to lean into it, you can. There are a couple of nice options, but none of it is necessary. Horsemanship will automatically level up on its own. Don't be afraid to fast travel. You're going to have to use your horse so often that this skill will increase on a very steady basis. Houndmaster will not increase on its own. You're going to need to manually make sure that you're investing in your dog, but in my opinion, it's absolutely worth it and something you're going to want to do. Scholarship will not increase on its own for the most part. It's going to get small boosts from dialogue, but really, if you want this to increase, you're going to have to read, which is going to make all of the skills in this list level significantly faster. So in my opinion, that makes scholarship worth it, but it does take you out of the game. It is a manual process, so you make your own decision about whether or not it's worth it to you. Stealth is another one that you have to manually do, but there are some missions that are going to require stealth. And so having high ranks in this already is going to help you in those missions. And just overall in the game, there are some situations where being able to sneak in is more advantageous than trying to go in guns blazing or attempting to persuade someone. Survival is something where, yes, it's manual, but there's so much here that is really going to make your playthrough easier that I would say it's just about automatic. You're going to be hunting, you're going to be drying your food, you're going to be cooking your food, you're going to be picking herbs, at least a little bit. So all of that is going to help increase your survival. You don't need to manually worry about this unless you see something in the perk list that's really important to you. Slowly but surely, it'll increase and you'll be able to get what you want. Thievery is the last one, and yet again, it does not manually increase. You have to actively make the decision that you want to be good at picking locks or picking pockets. In my opinion, out of the two, picking locks is infinitely easier, and so just make sure that you're picking all the locks that you're capable of doing when you pass by them, as long as you're alone, and this will slowly but surely get higher, and absolutely it's going to give you more gear, give you more things you can use, and it'll be well worth your time. Hopefully that breakdown helps all of you. All right, and then the last section of this game is about combat. Warfare takes care of itself. As you enter combat, as you use different weapons, warfare will automatically increase. You don't need to worry about that at all. Next up is the list of weapons. Keep in mind, you can use belts that'll allow you to switch between up to, I think, 3, maybe even 4 different weapons at a time. So you don't have to stick to one weapon. However, obviously, if you want to get high ranks in a particular category, sticking with just that weapon is going to be beneficial to you. I want to skip down to the bottom and talk about marksmanship, because I think it's very easy to ignore and just focus on the melee weapons. But honestly, if you can get high ranks in marksmanship, it will be the most important weapon on this list. for multiple reasons. First of all, there's crossbows, bows, and guns. All of them are very, very different. And so you're going to want to experiment with the different options and figure out which one appeals to you. But because it's a ranged weapon, you're going to use it out of the range of most of the melee combatants. And usually, even in a group that has up to 5 bandits, there's only going to be 1, maybe 2 archers. Most of the enemies are going to have to get in melee distance of you before they can actually hit you. So if you're able to whittle them down significantly to just 2 or even 1 person before they finally close in melee range, that is going to do so much to increase your own survivability. So it's absolutely to your advantage to get marksmanship high and use it on a regular basis. Now, when you're looking at these other melee weapons, each one of them has special perks or things that make it special and that you might want to consider. In my opinion, swords are the best, specifically because they're the only weapon that allow you to use a master strike. Master strikes are basically unblockable counterattacks. These are difficult to pull off because you basically have to attack at the same time the enemy is attacking from the opposite side. But when you do it, you're going to interrupt their attack and do a massive amount of damage. And in some cases, you will just flat out take the enemy out. It's super cool to pull those off. Makes you feel like a sword master. And it just feels right for Henry, especially since his father's sword that he's trying to get is a long sword. To me, it's just obvious he's supposed to be a knight, a swordsman, and so I go in this direction. Now, the other options are heavy weapons. The advantage of heavy weapons is that they absolutely crush armor and shields. Swords are great for unarmored opponents, but against opponents with plate armor and with shields, it's going to be significantly less useful. Even when you pull off the master strikes, they're not going to do quite as much damage because those types of enemies are obviously built to take punishment. Heavy weapons will crush their armor, destroy their shields, and make it much, much easier for you to take out those types of opponents. So it's definitely something for you to consider. The advantage of polearms should be obvious. They are going to help you keep enemies out of range. Heavy weapons and even swords do not have the same range as polearms. So you're going to be able to attack enemies from a longer distance, keep them out of range, protect yourself more, and it's just going to give you a different combat style that might be very, very appealing to some of you. And then finally, you have unarmed combat. And I know many of you probably enjoy the monk way of fighting. There are many unarmed fighting quests that require you to basically be a bare knuckle brawler. So having high ranks here is going to make it much, much easier to get through those encounters. Also, for whatever reason, you can block and parry weapons while you are unarmed. I don't know why this is supposed to be realistic, but it is. And so I'm sure there are many of you who would love going up against heavily armed opponents with nothing but your fists and being absolutely able to lay waste to them. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 will allow you to do that. And that's it. That is my full breakdown, trying to help give those of you who are hesitant about the game some information that might make it a little bit easier for you to figure out whether or not the experience is right for you. Some of these systems are obviously a little bit more simple than they may appear at first glance, while others absolutely you would have to lean into in order to enjoy the experience. But again, I think it's worth it. I've had a great time with this game thus far, and I highly recommend it to anybody who enjoys interesting gaming experiences, loves great narrative, and just wants to support a developer who obviously is making games that they care about. We don't get enough games that really utilize creativity, that try to give the players something they haven't seen before, and I always want to show those type of developers love and invest in their products when I can, because we want to see more things like this in the gaming industry. that's all for the video. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything different that you wanted to see, anything you felt like was missing from this. If there's any specific content you want to see regarding Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, by all means let me know. I'd be happy to provide it. One more time, if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. I stream on a very, very regular basis, pretty much every evening around 9 or 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. So catch my live streams on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.